lovely people. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Maya. If you've never been here before, hit that subscribe button and stick around. We have fun times. So, you may have noticed that I didn't post an August wrap-up, and it's October. And that's because I was watching Allie from Hardback Hoarders video where she played her kind of wrap-up game that she has, which is what is it even called? It's essentially a version of Fuck, Marry, Kill, but it's something rewrite and burn. Reread, rewrite, burn. That was harder to say than I thought. Whose video was I watching? I don't know. I'll try and figure it out and leave it linked down below. But anyway, the way this works is I have my handy little ghosty mug, and I have the titles of the books I read from August and September in here, and we're going to pull out 3 at a time and do reread, rewrite, and burn. And that's why I waited until October to do this video, because I wanted to know, you know who it was?
Make talk, squirrel.
Jan Agaton. It was definitely Jan's video. I'm gonna go through the books from August and September and we'll make them compete against each other. Before I start though, I do have one caveat, which is that the 2 memoirs I read these past 2 months, I did not include in this game because I don't really think it's fair to say that I would rewrite or burn a memoir because it's like someone's life and their life experiences. So before we jump into the game, I'm just going to talk about the 2 memoirs that I read. So the first one that I read, I'll put on the screen here, We Have Always Been Here by Samra. I just have my bullet journal here. Habib, and this was a book club book. I had heard about this book before, but I hadn't had it on my TBR or anything, and then my book club decided to read it, and overall I really enjoyed this book. It really opened my eyes to how Ahmadi Muslims are treated in Pakistan, but just like growing up in Pakistan and her experience with that, and then also coming to Canada, being a first-generation Canadian and having to basically like guide her parents through everything, and then like discovering her queer identity in conjunction with her Muslim identity, and like how she used that to further her career, and all these things she went through. And I think it was really well written and it gave a really good insight into her life. The only thing that didn't really work for me was because it wasn't super relatable, but it wasn't written for me, a white second-generation Canadian. Like, it's not my story, so it's okay if it doesn't resonate with me. Also, she was super in tune, and like religion was super important to her, and religion is not important to me at all, so I've never had to like reconcile things in my life against religion like she did. But I still think it's a great story, and I definitely recommend. It's a great read. And the other book that I read, the other memoir I read was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I loved this book. I think it's as great as everyone's been saying that it is. Definitely check the trigger warnings though before you read it, because there is a lot of graphic detail about some very triggering things in here. But I think it is extremely well written. Clearly writing is one of her passions, and I think it gives a lot of look into child actors. It gives a lot of information on her life and her family and how she was raised, and there were so many things in here to me that I was like, how is this real? Like, I would not believe it if it wasn't like a memoir and like her true story, because like it's just so foreign to me, thankfully, but people live like this all the time. Like, her mom was a huge hoarder, so they couldn't live in their bedrooms that they had in their house. They all slept on like Costco gymnasium mats in the living room because their beds were so cluttered with stuff. And what I think was really honest about this book was that it starts out with her as a kid, and instead of coming at it from like what she knows now, she came at it from what she knew as a kid. And what she knew as a kid was that her mom was great and she loved her mom. And then it wasn't until she had distance between her and her mom, and when her mom died really, that she realized that her mom was the root of a lot of her problems. And I think that's really true, that like when you're in a situation you don't see things. But instead of looking back and saying like, oh, when I was a kid, blah, 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 it's written in first person, it's written in present tense, so it's very in detail and just very real. And it makes me like her even more, and I'm very glad that I read this. I've heard the audiobook is great as well. Okay, memoirs are done. Let's get into the game. Okay, 2 and 3. So we'll have 3 rounds because there were 9 books outside of my memoirs. 11 total. Okay, so the first one here is Akawar, so A Court of War and Ruin. The next one is Artemis Made Me Do It. Oh, this is gonna be hard. And the next one is, oh my god, the next one is Gideon the Ninth. Oh man, you guys. Okay, I have the books here. So we have A Court of Wings and Ruin, which is the 3rd book in the Sarah J. Maas ACOTAR series. We have Artemis Made Me Do It, which is the sequel to Aphrodite Made Me Do It. And we have Gideon the Ninth. So this one's actually not as hard as I thought. So we'll start with reread. Gideon is 100% the reread. This was the best book I read of all of the 2 months. So it is a story about a world where, oh my god, now I'm like blanking on what it's about. Basically, Gideon is like the sword master of the 9th house, and in this world there are 9 houses, and are there 10 houses? I read it like 2 months ago, guys. There are 9 houses. So basically in this world there are 9 houses that are all on like different planets, and they all have like different things. It's kind of like the Hunger Games, like they have different things that they're good at. So like the 9th is like good at, they're the keepers of the lost tomb. And then there's like, the 8th is like the forgiving house, whatever. So essentially, Gideon and then Harrow, who's like the kind of princess, I guess, of the 9th, what do they call it? Heir to the house of the 9th, reverend daughter. She and Gideon end up going to compete in this tournament that is not a tournament, but this set of tasks that's put on by like the most important people, and they and representatives from all of the other houses are also there because the government is trying to get more like high-powered necromancers, and yeah, so if Harrow succeeds, she'll be the all-immortal, all-powerful servant of the resurrection. But every reverend or like princess, like every daughter or son or whatever, everyone who goes needs to have like a cavalier with them, or a cavalier. I never thought about these books when I was reading it. Anyway, so Gideon goes with her and they have to complete all of these tasks. And like the shock of how good this book was insane to me. I love it. I love this series with like all my heart. I went out and I bought this one because I got it from the library originally, and I bought Harrow the Ninth, which is the next one. I just love how this author writes. I love the characters. Like Gideon is just so hilarious, and the whole story is so well written, and I loved learning about like the people from the other houses. And there were twists and turns and just, it's beautiful. I didn't expect to like it and I loved it. So that is the reread. Next, I would rewrite A Court of Wings and Ruin. Like, so many different things about this book I would rewrite. This is my least favorite book of the series. If you don't know what ACOTAR is, first of all, where have you been? But I will explain to you that it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling about Feyre, who's a human, and she goes out into the woods to hunt, and she accidentally shoots a fae that is in disguise as an animal, and to atone for that, she gets taken to the spring court of the fae realms, and has to live there with Tamlin, who's the High Fae. Is that what it's called? Or the High Lord of the Spring Court, to like repay, and then they fall in love, blah, blah, blah. I've heard this is the worst book in the series, and it is, of the main books. We'll get to that later. There was just a lot happening in here, and I didn't like a lot of it. It was kind of boring. There were a bunch of battle scenes where I was just like, okay, stop, like, I'm so done. I don't know if you've seen, like, the third Hobbit movie, the Battle of the Five Armies, where there are like all these different armies coming in from all these different directions, and they're all like fighting, and then there's like people you don't think are coming and all this stuff. That's basically like the last 200 pages of this book, and then like the first 400 pages are like the lead up to it. And the only parts I really enjoyed of this book was like the banter when there wasn't a lot of problems happening. And I also spent like the first chunk of the book wishing that she was like in a different place. So if the whole thing, it just didn't really jive for me, but I think if it was rewritten, it could be, and it's important enough in the series that we don't want to get rid of it. So unfortunately, that leaves Artemis Made Me Do It for the burn, and like obviously I did enjoy it. There's lots of stickies here, and there were parts that I enjoyed, but I didn't like it as much as Aphrodite Made Me Do It, and so therefore I will burn this. But essentially, like Aphrodite Made Me Do It, which I reviewed in the July wrap-up, it's poetry about like self-care, but it's ropes in the goddesses of Greek mythology and has some from like their perspective, and there's like beautiful art, and it's very mixed media. The pages are gorgeous, and there were some parts I really loved, but of the other two, it has to be burned. Okay, my camera says it's going to overheat, so we'll see if it does, but that was the first three. On to the next. Okay, so the first one that we have is The Final Gambit. Oh, that book's upstairs. I don't have it with me. We have Hotel Magnifique. And we have Love on the Brain. Oh God, oh God. This is gonna be hard, you guys. Okay, so we'll start with Reread, and that one is Hotel Magnifique by Emily J. Taylor. A hotel that magically appears in different places all over the world, and you have to be either very rich or lucky to win a ticket or buy a ticket to attend. And inside the hotel is all magically enchanted to show you all of the best things and to have the themed room that you want and the food that you want, and it has all of these performances and everything. And it follows these two girls who want to get out of their town, they need a new life, and they get hired to work in the Hotel Magnifique and travel around with it, and everything seems good except everything is not good. It's not. This was the other best book that I read this month besides Gideon. I adored it. I would like 5 more, please. I loved the characters, I loved the hotel, I loved the story. I would love to go there. Yeah, like even though it was young adult, I just devoured it. I loved it so much. I highly recommend. And it says it's for fans of the Night Circus, and it 100% is for this fan of the Night Circus. I loved it. I hope there's more coming. So this is what I would reread. I can't believe I have to make this decision. This is easy for me, but then I can't believe I have to burn the other book. So I would rewrite The Final Gambit. I'm shocked I'm this close to burning this book, but because I know how I would rewrite it, I know how she could rewrite it to make it better, I had to go with a rewrite for this one. So this is the third book of the Inheritance Game series. The series follows a girl, Avery, who randomly inherits a billionaire's fortune who she is not related to, and in order to receive the fortune, she has to live in the house with his 4 grandsons and his other relatives who despise her because she took their fortune for a year. And this is the last book. I loved the first and second books. They were so compelling to read. I devoured them so quickly. It's one of my favorite series I've ever read, and unfortunately The Final Gambit just did not deliver for me in most aspects. The last 100 pages were exciting. I enjoyed it. I liked the way she ended the series, but I didn't like the book. I would change essentially the entire plot of this book. Mostly just the thing that... What I don't like about mysteries is when you don't have all the information to solve it because something is introduced that you don't know and you had no concept of to be able to solve the mystery, and that's what happens in this book. So that was kind of not compelling to me. There was also a lot less of the love triangle, which I loved, and a lot more of like everyone just kind of being annoyed with each other or not speaking, and I didn't really like that very much. So the final 100 pages were great, but I would rewrite this to make it more like the other books, and then I think it would have been happier. But overall, a great series, and I think I still gave this like 4 stars, so it's not that bad. And then unfortunately that means we have to burn Love on the Brain, which is sad because I did really like this book. And in a different pile, this would be a rewrite for me because she made it so predictable. I guessed exactly what was going to happen about 90% of the book from like the 10th page. So the only way that I'm justifying burning this is that it's very similar to The Love Hypothesis. I don't agree with some of the reviews I read of this book that was like, she just wrote The Love Hypothesis again and like changed the characters and gave them different colored hair. I don't agree with that. I think it stands alone and it is worthy on its own without The Love Hypothesis. The stories aren't connected, but they're quite similar. But, because I have The Love Hypothesis, I would be okay with burning this. Okay, this is the 3rd time recording this. I should probably tell you what this book is about. So essentially, it's about a scientist named B who is offered a job to work at NASA, co-running a project with this guy, Levi, who she thinks hated her in university. And so it's kind of like enemies to lovers. I don't know if it's 100% enemies to lovers, but it's enemies to lovers, and they have to work together on this project, and then they kind of things are going wrong, and they both care about the project so much that they need to work together in order to save it, and then they get to know each other, and you understand where I'm going with this. But I really loved this book, and I'm very sad I have to burn it, so I'm just gonna put it down here and pretend I didn't. There's only 3 books left, and I know what they are, but I still want to pull them out of here. So we have The 2000s Made Me Do It, A Court of Frost and Starlight, and Wrecked by Lauren Asher. Okay, so I'm going to start with the easy one, and that's Burn, and that is A Court of Frost and Starlight. This was so unnecessary. I hate that I wasted my time reading it. Normally, I'm all for fan service books, but I could not be bothered with this. And I don't know what that says about me about this series because I love the characters, but I didn't care. I didn't care. I'm actually so angry about this book because, like, I've heard there's a couple of things in here that you need before you read the next book, so I had to read it, but like, oh, it was such a struggle. So this comes after A Court of Wings and Ruin, and it's a novella, so it just kind of like slots in between the third and the fifth book, A Court of Silver Flames. So this is literally just like some things are happening. That's basically it. I think it kind of wraps up the original perspective of the first 4 books, or 3 plus this, because we move into a different perspective in the 5th book. But this was just completely unnecessary, and I am so mad. So mad. So burn. Now, more difficult. I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna say I'm gonna rewrite The 2000s Made Me Gay, but this is not like the author didn't write it well, because the thing is that the author wrote it well for her experience. I decided to include this one because it's not 100% a memoir. There's a lot more research in here than there necessarily is just her life. So I'm willing to roast it, and I will. But, like, where am I going with this? This book was not relatable to me, and I really wanted it to be relatable, so I would just rewrite it to be about the 2010s Made Me Gay instead. Essentially, this is an essay about how different things in pop culture contributed to this author's childhood in the 2000s, how society saw the queer community, how she saw the queer community, how she saw her own queerness. And I just really thought that, like, the 2000s impacted me more than it did, and what I didn't realize going in is that I knew that from 2000 to 2010, I was 1 and all the way to 11, but the author is 10 years older than me, so she is experiencing 11 to 21, and with this kind of thing, those years are much more formative, or much more important to who you are as a person and your relationships and your sexuality and stuff than I personally think 1 to 10 is, or 1 to 11. And the things that she was referencing in this book, I just had no concept of, because not only was I a child, but I also didn't watch a lot of more adult television or books or movies or whatever. So there's a lot of things in here that she talks about that were happening when she was between 11 and 21, and I was like, the L word. A bunch of like reality shows on MTV. I never watched MTV. What was the show she was talking about? Dawson's Creek. Lindsay Lohan, like dating a girl, and there's a little bit about Glee and things like that, and there's a little bit about Harry Potter, which those things did inform my childhood, but things were different then. Things were different in the 2010s than they were in the 2000s. So I would rewrite it to be more relatable to me, but if you picture it as a historical kind of telling about what it was like to be gay during the 2000s, what it was like to be like discovering yourself, discovering your sexuality, and how society saw the LGBTQ plus community, then it's definitely worth a read. But it just wasn't exactly what I wanted, so I would rewrite it. My camera is overheating again, so we're gonna make this quick. So the last book is Wrecked by Lauren Asher. This is the 3rd book in the Dirty Air series, and you know what? This does work out perfectly because this is my favorite one so far. This one, so the Dirty Air series is about Formula 1 drivers and then the girls who happen to accidentally and oftentimes unwillingly at first fall in love with them. So in this one we're following Jax, and he is the like kind of broody bad boy type, gets in trouble for drinking and partying all the time, but in reality he's just like super anxious and upset, and he doesn't know what to do with it, and he falls in love with the girl who is his PR manager, which like the most relatable one for me because that's kind of that's my degree. So it was the best one of the series. I really liked their relationship. I loved his family, and I loved the portrayal of his anxiety. I thought it was quite realistic, honestly. I don't know how realistic the F1 stuff in these books are. Sometimes I think it's super realistic and sometimes I don't. But I don't really care because it's a setting that I like, and the books really kind of like feed into each other. So he's friends with the other two main drivers from the other books and things like that. So I quite enjoyed this. And the fourth one is on my list for another month. Speaking of which, you can check out my October TBR in the cards up above. But those are all the books I read in August and September. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you read down below. And if you read these and you have similar different thoughts, different choices that you would make, please comment down below. Give it a thumbs up. Follow me on Instagram, TikTok, all the things for more daily content. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!